Hi, family. Welcome back to this week's episode of The Gold Corner. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all the continued love and support that you're showing us. If you still haven't done so, hit the little gold ribbon that's in the corner of the video. That'll subscribe you to the video. This channel is dedicated in spreading childhood cancer awareness and to speak about these warriors that have once fought it and are home, and the ones that are currently fighting right now, and even the success stories, because we've had those. And I created this channel in memory of my 2-year-old daughter who passed away from neuroblastoma. And again, this is something that God put in my heart to create this channel, to be able to have this platform and speak about these warriors, these real life superheroes, as I call them, and everything that they went through. And all of these stories, most of these stories, you're hearing firsthand from us, from the parents that actually went through everything. So, welcome to the Gold Corner. Let's do this.
And now it's time for the main event. This is the moment you have all been waiting for. In memory of Mia Ojeda. Dedicated to all the brave little warriors that have fought and the ones that are currently fighting childhood cancer. For the thousands watching around the world, fighting out of the Gold Corner, it's time!
This week, I have a very special guest. All of my guests are special, but a couple of weeks ago, actually a little over 2 months from now, we had an opportunity to be a panel on a podcast, a panel of parents, where the podcast was actually speaking about grief. There were seven of us there that were speaking, and it was just supposed to be a panel. It was just supposed to be some, answers, some questions and some answers. But we actually ended up staying on there like 2 or 3 hours. We became a family and we got connected and we became really, really close because of our experience and everything that we had gone through. That podcast, I am going to be leaving the link here. It's a podcast that was started by two cancer moms, by Ty and Laura, from Oregon. The podcast is called Golden Voices, and I actually had the honor and pleasure of being on there this past Friday. Again, I'm going to leave the link here so you can go ahead and check that out. But it was there where I met the our next guest, and again, we started talking, and we all became very close when part of this broken family. And you'll hear me say that a lot. We are a broken family, but we are broken together. So we have Jennifer Bridges from Sherwood, Oregon. And Jennifer, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being my friend first and foremost, and being a part again of this broken family that we are. Unfortunately, we did not choose to be here, but we're here and we're trying to do the best that we can in our situation. So, Jennifer, thank you again so much for being a part of the Gold Corner, and we can't wait to hear about Warrior Julian. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be able to be here and share with you a little bit about our story. I know each story is so unique and it's individual, and we all within this broken family hurt for each other. I remember our panel and our meeting and hearing your story about your little precious girl, and I could feel those feelings and the tragedy that really just hits deep. So tonight is my chance to get to share with you a little bit about my little boy, about Julian Peace Bridges, and his little life that was way too short, but delightful and meaningful and precious nonetheless. And I think one of the things that's the most difficult about grief and about losing a little person and watching them suffering in treatment is really to try to make sense out of what doesn't make sense. It isn't possible. And so now that I'm 6 months out from losing my little person, I feel like I'm beginning to at least reconcile. This is the new chapter. This is the new place. And while I never wanted this journey, would not have chosen this journey, it's where I'm at in this time and space. And who am I going to be now? So I'd just like to take a moment and go back to the beginning, a little bit farther back to when Julian came into our life. My husband Shane and I have been married for 25 years, and we have two older kids, Harrison and Caitlin, and they are 18 and 21. So as you can imagine, 3 years ago, Julian was just a little delight and surprise. Sometimes I even call myself a hybrid parent, almost like a grandparent, because a little more relaxed, a little more margin in life. And he was just all things wonderful. You know how it is when your kiddo just can't make a mistake. They're just sweet. They're just cute. So 3 years ago, Julian was born, and we relaxed, we settled down, we did more things that were geared around just making him enjoy life, and us too, because when the first two big kids were born, we were working our butts off at work. We were racing through our careers and just trying to make sure we had extra money in that food budget. You know how it is when you first get started. So I do feel really fortunate that we were a little bit older, and I do think that helped us in the journey. So many of the pediatric families that are in treatment, they're young. That's more the norm. You know, you have a young family, a young marriage, a young couple, a single mom, and it's a single dad. It's a difficult stage in life to accept this monstrous tragedy, this monstrous journey, and you're like, wait a second, where am I at? So Julian was 21 months old when he was diagnosed. He and I had just gotten back from a humanitarian trip, a volunteer trip that we do to Ethiopia. I had decided, while it was surprising to have this little person, we weren't going to hold back. We were going to embrace life. And we'd been in Ethiopia for all of August, almost a month. And actually, I think it was September. Those months run together. You know, you kind of start to forget things a little bit. But we'd been in Ethiopia all of September and came home, and he'd had a little bit of fussiness, you know. He had a little ingrown toenail and he was limping a little bit. And I tried to do the Dr. Mommy thing while we were in Ethiopia and trimmed up that little toenail and checked on it. And he seemed to be a little bit fussy, but he was teething, and a little Motrin helped with that. You know, almost 2, that's what they do. And his appetite seemed a little bit suppressed, but again, we're in Ethiopia. You know, we're not eating the normal food that we eat at home that Mama cooks every day. And it was a little bit off, but not enough to feel really concerning. We got home, and I decided to go ahead and take him into the regular pediatrician and just to have him checked out. And while we were there, we went in on a Friday, and the regular pediatrician wasn't there. It was somebody filling in, and the guy was actually a little bit kind of sharp with me, kind of like, yeah, looks like he had a hangnail, and yeah, maybe he's a toddler who's teething, and there is an 11-hour time change, so he's probably a little overtired. And I thought, okay, all right, yeah, I'm probably just being overly cautious. But what I didn't tell you was we were also moving at the time. So not only had we been in Ethiopia for the month, we'd sold our house. I always like an adventure with a property, and we had this little farmhouse that we had this bright idea that we would fix up and make it fun for Julian on 2.5 little acres, a few goats, some chickens, plant some veggies, and we call it, you know, just a grand life for a little kid, right? So after that visit, I came back home to our travel trailer that we were adventuring in while my sweet husband is helping oversee the remodel of this little tiny farmhouse that was just a hot mess. And he just wasn't getting better. He just continued to stay fussy, and he seemed to eat even a little bit less. And I just kept feeling like something wasn't quite right. But our family is one that he hadn't even ever had an ear infection before. I don't think he'd ever been on antibiotics. It wasn't normal for us to feel like something was wrong with my kid. How could my kid have something wrong with them? How could they be sick? We're a normal family, right? So it was only a week later, and by this time he was wanting to be held all the time, and he was just fussy, and he was the most delightful, sweet little boy. So I took him back in. It was another Friday, and again, his regular pediatrician wasn't there, and got somebody else filling in. But this time, there was like an intern there, someone who was not quite a real doctor yet and was learning, and she took all the time in the world with us. She was checking his little legs and his arms, and where's the discomfort, and what is he not doing. She listened and listened, and when she was done, she walked out and talked to the regular doctor that was on call, and that lady came in, a little bit older lady, and she said, you know what, our intern says something's not quite right, and I seem to think that she's probably right. I think you need to do some lab work, but we don't have any way to do that here in the typical little pediatrician office. So she just said, why not just go ahead and grab a bag, go to the ED, a pediatric ED, that's St. V's close to us, have them checked out, they can pull some lab work, and we can just kind of make sure everything's okay, because I'm kind of uncomfortable with him still not really wanting to walk normally. So I thought, I've never even been to the pediatric ED, not with my big kids. And so I called Shane and I said, hey, Julian's still not doing well. I'm headed up to the hospital. I'm going to grab a bag from the travel trailer, and head up to the hospital. He's like, okay. And I picked him up on the way, and we got up there. And there was something wrong. We all knew there was something not quite right. And I think that's one of the most crazy things about neuroblastoma. I don't know, Joel, you probably know this too, that so many of the early onset symptoms of neuroblastoma, one, they're latent. They don't start from the beginning often. It's really hard to detect. And the symptoms often can look like something else. So we got into the ED, and there was a very, very kind doctor that saw us. There was something just about his demeanor that I could tell he was listening, and I felt so much relief, because I just wanted to know that I wasn't crazy, and that somebody was going to really take into consideration what was going on with my baby. This was my little diamond, my little treasure, my gift, this little human that I just adored. He was everything. And they started running some tests and doing blood work, and they're like, it seems like maybe he has an infection in his hip or something. Maybe that's why he's not stepping. He might have, if you have rhinovirus, like a typical cold, sometimes that can settle into your hip. So maybe that's what's going on. And we can give him some antibiotics, but that's probably not going to help. But maybe we should scan his hip. And of course, this is in the ED. So this is over a course of a couple of hours. And we ended up getting an ultrasound done on his hip. And when they did that, they just happened to scan over towards his abdomen, little teeny tiny 2-year-old. It's just a little itty bitty thing. And so doing that ultrasound, they found something there, but they weren't sure. So at that point, they said, yeah, we're uncomfortable with this. We're going to go ahead and admit you. So while we were up in the main area of St. V's of that hospital, again, they were doing all of these tests, running all the things. They kept thinking that maybe we had hepatitis or we had something going on because of our big trip. Do you have malaria? And while I'm not a good medical person, I still understand a little bit about the Ethiopian typical things that people can get just because we go there often for our charity work. And I was like, if it was malaria, we've been home over a month. If it was yellow fever, he probably would be dead already. Like, I'm trying to rack through my mind. What could it be? What could it be? Because there's this sense of wanting to fix it. And while you're working with some of the smartest people in the world, there's still this sense as a parent, like being held responsible or something, or like, I ought to be able to figure this out. I ought to be able to fix it. What's going on? And they said, at that point, they said they thought what they saw with the ultrasound was maybe an infection or sepsis in his hip, that it was maybe a little bit worse. And again, I'm like, I don't know, maybe so. Nobody was confident. And I don't think it was a CT scan. Isn't that funny how like grief, I really think grief really messes with your memories. But we did another scan, and that was when they said they found that there was a large mass in his abdomen. And they promptly sent us to the Children's Hospital to Dornbecker, where they have an oncology floor. And they put Julian and I on a little stretcher, and they were wanting to put him into a car seat and strap him. And of course, by this time, he was afraid. He was sad. He didn't feel well. And I'm like, I'm going to hold my baby. I was probably a little argumentative. And we got on that ambulance and we headed for Dornbecker. I don't even know, honestly, if I knew what the word oncology was. Isn't that crazy? I mean, so we ended up at Dornbecker. They put us in room 1, right next to the receptionist by the entryway doors. And what we didn't know is we would end up being in that hospital on that floor like the first 53 of 60 days. We had such a hard time trying to control his pain. And that first week, seeing him suffer, when I talked to some of my friends about what we went through, losing Julian has been very final and really hard. And yet some of my worst PTSD was watching him suffer in the hospital and the extreme pain and watching his heart rate jump up over 200 because he was in extreme pain. That first week, he went through several procedures and scans. And scans is kind of its own thing that's really hard in and of itself. You wouldn't think it would be a big deal, but when you have a little tiny human and they're going to have an MRI, you have to sedate them. And in order to sedate them, they have to be NPO, which means no food or drink. And when you're in the hospital, you're on a hospital schedule. So they are hopeful to get you into a certain time slot. So now my little tiny dude who's been struggling to eat, who doesn't feel well and wants mama to comfort, and all he wants is a applesauce pouch or a yogurt pouch, and he's underweight, and I'm having to deny him food, deny him any kind of comfort, any kind of drink, and just see him suffer. So I think he had like at one point he had, I think it was either 2 or 3 full days where he was NPO, and just trying to get the schedule for his bone marrow biopsy, for the MRI, for getting his Hickman put in. A Hickman is a double lumen line that goes to his heart so that you can run 2 sets of medication, or you can draw blood from one line and give chemo at the same time. It gives a lot of versatility. Something else that was kind of unusual during that first week was, especially with this new Hickman and trying to keep him clean, you have to give him a bath every day. And in the beginning, we didn't know. We used special wipes that take away any kind of germs or residual that are on the skin. And originally, they tried to get him into the bathtub, which was just a little tiny baby bathtub on the floor in the bathroom. And for whatever reason, because he was in so much pain, that moment traumatized him, and he never had a bath again after that. My little boy knew how to swim. He was amazing. He loved all things water. And I think sometimes cancer is really terrible in and of itself. But the things we don't often think about, I would guess, as parents that haven't been touched by cancer, are so many of the little things that cancer stole from us. So my little baby that loved to swim and loved to splash never ever got into the bathtub again. And he was too afraid. So, I mean, that's just one little example, but I think treatment, not just the chemo running through his veins, but the NPOs, the trying to bathe them, all of the pokes, all of the beeping sounds. I mean, forever I will hear, and we called it a tower. I don't know what you guys called it, Joel, but we have the big system with all the meds and the fluids and all the things running. And when it needs a nurse's attention or to be reset or to add some more meds, it just makes this awful beeping sound. And it can beep in the middle of the night. It can beep, and just that sound can take your breath away. I think another thing, there's so many things, right? Let's be honest. It's just the sense of fear that you're constantly trying to overcome and trying to be up for your child and trying to be ready to attack the world and ready to fight and do all of that. And it doesn't give you a lot of space on the inside to grieve what you see your child going through. You just have to kind of hold it all up inside. And so, month after month after month, chemo 1, and I don't know, maybe you've talked about it on the channel, but for Julian, that would be 5 or 6 days of treatment, which means chemo running almost nonstop through his veins. And then a week at home where we're giving him shots for 6 days in their teeny tiny little legs. What mama wants to learn how to give injections into the bony little thin body of their baby? No one. And then usually we'd have about a week that he felt a little tiny bit better after the first 60 days. That first 60 days was brutal. So chemo 1 cycle, chemo 2, chemo 3, chemo 4, chemo 5. You just keep coming back. You just keep coming back. And then he had resection, so the surgery where they removed the large abdominal tumor. But what happened with Julian is he never really fully responded to the chemos. For neuroblastoma, typically after the first front line of chemo and resection, the hope is that the child will be NED or really close, so no evidence of disease. And Julian just couldn't get a break. He had a real mixed response from the very beginning, where some would grow and some would appear to shrink. And part of that, there's 2 things that go along with that. One is that scanning that much of his body is really difficult to do. When you do it, we say an MRI, but it's not like it's a whole body MRI. It's certain parts of the body. So you don't really know what's going on. So it's hard to tell. And if we could have seen in his body perfectly and knew the end of the results, which nobody could, he really wasn't responding well to the frontline treatment. And we probably could have shifted gears to something else, but there's not a lot of other options out there. That's part of the problem. So for babies like ours that have a severe, I don't know, not severe, because there are kids that have it, that are stage 4, that's really advanced, and they still respond well to treatment. But for whatever reason, some of the kiddos have a really aggressive form where treatment doesn't seem to help much. So after surgery was actually felt great because it took such a large mass out of his belly, and he recovered well, and it seemed like he felt better. For the first time, his blood pressure started to be a little bit more normal, was coming down. And we did chemo 6 for the last cleanup, is what they call it. But his liver had multiple lesions inside of it, and one way on the inside that was inoperable. And at that point, he did have less bone marrow, almost none that was inside his bone marrow. So that was a good sign. but they couldn't do the typical next step of frontline treatment, which would be transplant. And so they're kind of grasping, what do we do? What should we do next? And right about that time, so his surgery was in March, as you can remember, COVID kind of hit. So where a lot of the families try to go with neuroblastoma with really complicated cases is to get input from MSK, which is Sloan Hospital in New York. They have a lot of really great information, but we couldn't get it on an airplane, especially for a neutropenic or a child with an immune compromised system that's been affected by chemo. To get on a regular airplane just wasn't an option. And all of the medical institutions are suffering from all the new information of COVID and how do we respond and how do we keep people safe. And it wasn't long after that, I think, that the Ronald McDonald House even had some COVID cases in it at MSK. And so everybody was kind of freaking out. So we tried to get some information by phone with the hospital there. And between the hospital there and our oncologist department or team, they said, let's go ahead and try some immunotherapy with a different set of chemo drugs, because a lot of the kids really respond with immunotherapy. I thought, okay, that's good, because at least he's maybe a little bit better, right? And you're holding on to this hope, even if it takes forever, and even if we're watching him suffer, and even if he's losing all the chance to be a normal toddler, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep going. We're going to try. We're going to keep showing up. And kind of going back to young families, even for me, I couldn't work. I was 100% taking care of Julian. And thankfully, because Shane works and he had our insurance, I could take that time. And for the charity work that we do, I have an awesome, amazing team. They just stepped it up and they filled in all of the gaps. They even did a trip without me back to Ethiopia to see our kiddos over there that I just love. They're like our family. But for young families, that's a whole nother topic of how people suffer financially. They suffer job loss, all kinds of things that happen with that. And I was really fortunate to be able to keep going back. So here we were, immunotherapy, chemo, and one of the things that's super hard about it is the extreme pain. And seeing him suffer. You're on a pain pump. They're doing the very best they can. And we're just doing all of this to try to save his life. Trying to save his life. And yet he's writhing in pain. I'm having to hold him. I'm fatigued. I'm exhausted. 3 and 4 hours of just holding him in place. We switched from the first med. Again, I do feel so grief foggy when I try to think of specific things, and switched over to Dilaudid, which was the only thing that seemed to help a little bit on these super high levels. And Benadryl and Ativan and Tylenol and all the things. And sweet boy, he just loved, even through treatment, he just loved. Mama, it's okay. It's okay, Mama. I know owies. I have no owies, Mama. I okay. Normally you scan after each cycle of immunotherapy chemo. But each time when we came home after a week of being in the hospital, he played and he ran, and we were so hopeful that he was doing really, really well. So we decided, instead of scanning and going through NPO, because usually when a child is active and busy and in good nature, that means that the treatment's responding. And what we didn't know is he actually wasn't responding. He wasn't getting better. And we did 3 cycles of immunotherapy, chemo, through COVID. And one time he swabbed for a cold and he didn't have any symptoms, but when you have a cold or RSV or something extra, in order to protect all of the families, you have to be quarantined to your room. So one of the cycles, we were quarantined to the room for 6 days, a 10 by 12 room, just the 2 of us. You know, I was eating green beans and black beans out of a can. And I just think it's just hard. Like, you can't even describe the isolation and the suffering and the pain. And yet we just kept going. You just keep going, one foot in front of the other, keeping your head up as best as you can, loving our baby. I'll mention too, I think marriage, going it through treatment, is really, really hard, because there isn't anything left to give to your spouse, to give to your other person. And I think being, again, old helps me to have a little different perspective. But the thing that I held on to, I mean, there were times when I could have been irritated with Shane. Like, he's working on all the time. How rude. Well, hello, somebody needs to, right? Or going back to the house and checking on things. And plus with COVID, he wasn't always allowed to come up. And so there were 2 words that I hung on all the time, which I think helped me with my perspective with my marriages: grace and gratitude. And that was just trying to overlook all those little things that when you feel like you have no control of your circumstances, no control of helping my baby feel better, that's almost a sense of shame of, surely me as a mom could do something to help. This kiddo is my responsibility. Why am I failing my child? So grace and just overlooking and being patient with my sweet husband, who I know adored me and loved me and is human, suffering and hurting because he's watching us go through all of this. And gratitude, and just trying to be thankful for him, thankful for our little house, thankful that I have food to eat. Boy is still here. Thankful for my big kids. And I think that's one of the few things that I really could anchor into. While it wasn't easy and it didn't solve it, it still was something that helped me as I kept going through that. So after 8 months of treatment, I hate to use the word, but it really is torture. 8 months of watching my little boy suffer for the hope of saving his life. He seemed like he wasn't doing well again, and there isn't really any medical way to describe it except something's off. He's limping again, his energy level is low, and one of my friends, Cindy, has this beautiful little farm, and she has goats and chickens and ducks and alpacas, all the good stuff, and fresh blueberries. And she invited me to come over and to bring Julian and just to have a day. So we got all of our things packed up, and our snacks and our stuff and our blankies and the stroller and all the things that we would carry around with our cancer kiddo. And we sat on the big lawn and watched the animals. They did like a little show practically, bringing the ducks to us, and Julian would just delight and be excited, and they blew bubbles and ran around, and their kids ran around to entertain Julian. But what we didn't know is that would be the last day he'd ever walk again. And I'm so grateful for those moments we had. it would be after that we would go back that afternoon into the hospital and be checked, and they would say, yeah, he's not doing well. It's taking over. And they said, let's do one last attempt at a treatment that would be a curative treatment. That's kind of something in our oncology world too that we talk about. You know, there's treatments that you do to try to buy a little more time to get to the next, but it's called an MIBG therapy, and we're in Portland, and the two places that have it that are close to us are Seattle and UCSF in San Francisco. And I think Seattle for us is a lot harder to get a spot. So they had made arrangements for us to go to UCSF and started making all the conversations how this was going to go down, to put this radioactive material into his body that would be targeted towards the cancer, and how we wouldn't be able to hold him for a week and to see him through the window. And you know, it's like mind-blowing. You're like, how do you have a 2-year-old that you don't hold? How does that work again? How do you have a 2-year-old that you're not going to be in the hospital bed with them? How is this going to work? But within just a couple of days, we were still in the hospital, and his lungs started to fill with fluid. And they inserted a tube, another NPO procedure, a surgical procedure, inserted a tube, drained the lung, and within 24 hours of him being out, it was filling again, and he's having a hard time breathing. I mean, I can just remember laying there on the bed with him laying on me with his tummy up, just trying to move just to keep him comfortable. And he's just struggling to breathe, struggling every little breath. And so they said, okay, we can try one more time. We'll go back in there, we'll drain it again. But the problem is we're going to need to insert a tube that's more of a permanent tube. It's not a tube that's going to come out. So that means he would no longer be eligible for the MIBG therapy treatment, because you couldn't have an extra tube and go through treatment. But what are you going to do? You have to. So we said, well, if that's what we have to do. So they inserted in a more permanent tube. And that was when we finally realized we were really at the end, and that there wasn't any more tricks up our sleeve. There weren't any more things that we could do. So we took him home, and he was home with us for 2.5 weeks, and that was the end. that was the end. Our sweet, sweet angel baby. So I think on one hand, I really do like to tell the truth. The story is tragic. And for us, it's not a story, it's our life. It was our life then, and what's left of it is now. And we do have those really, really hard memories, those moments we hold on to that cause suffering still. And grief is its own tragedy in and of itself. I always talked to the oncologist, Julian's doctor, and said that my goal was to have no regrets. We're doing the best we can to make the best decisions we can, knowing what we have and knowing what we know. And I try to hold true to that, because it doesn't benefit me. It doesn't bring it back to beat myself up or to think, well, what if we would have tried this? Or what if we would have done this? Or what if we'd actually made it to New York? The truth is, neuroblastoma is really terrible. And I do have some thoughts, like, I wish we could do a better job with screening. I wish we could, do better in the future providing funds for cancer treatment. I had someone the other day, a doctor, say to me, well, it's a rare disease. There's not many kids that are suffering with it. So obviously there's not a lot of funding that goes to it. That was my dermatologist. And I thought, that's really an unfortunate way to think about things, because each one of these children is a diamond. It's a jewel. It's precious. And how can we, as a society, overlook? Neuroblastoma alone, and I don't know all the numbers. I'm not great with lots of numbers, but neuroblastoma alone is supposed to be around 700 kids a year. And when you add those up year after year after year, and all of the other pediatric cancers, these little people can't advocate for themselves. And for the most part, you have young families that are the ones who are trying to take care of these little people. And we need people that are further along, that are older, that have control of the purse strings to do a better job at advocating to bring more for research and to be able to really make an impact in the kids' lives early on. So I don't know, I just have a lot of thoughts about that. Where can we go from here? When you don't know, it's hard to fault somebody. But now that I know, they say when you know more, you know better, you do better. So where does that leave us? And that's kind of where I'm still kind of wrestling with all of it. At this point, I think one of the things that helps me to stay alive, because I love my big kids and I love my hubby and I have loved life, and it's painful. And so I have really pushed into purpose and finding purpose. And I believe that, God's given me a purpose to be here on this earth, and that it's my chance to do something. So if I can make life a little bit brighter for another family, for another child, then that's what I'm going to push into. That's the best that I know how to do. And grief would want to push me down, to keep me from moving forward, to be exhausted, to not be able to think. And I refuse. I refuse to let it beat me. I refuse to let it beat me. And I'm going to keep pushing forward. So what we decided to do, remember, we moved into this little farmhouse. And it finally did get finished and get remodeled. And now we have this 2.5 beautiful little acres that could be just a really difficult reminder every day that our little boy's not out here running around, right? But we took the idea that Cindy gave to us when Julian went out to the farm and loved on her animals and was just spoiled, and they took beautiful pictures of us. So that's what we're doing now, is doing the very best we can to create this cute little farm place for other kids that are in treatment, that are suffering. Of course, the farm didn't change our life. It didn't save Julian, but it sure gave us a little bit of brightness, a little bit of delight. And that's what we're working on here at our farm, is just to bring a little bit of joy and a little bit of delight. And because we've been working in Ethiopia the last 10 years and already had a nonprofit established, our board agreed. They said, you know what? We've been about kids in hard places in Ethiopia, but cancer kids are in hard places too. Why not just expand? And I'm one of those ones that says there's plenty of cookies to go around. You just can't hold the package. You got to pass them around. Let's share. So that's what we've done. We've it's about halfway there, but when kids come out and they get to feed the chickens and grab some eggs and run around, and no one's telling them to be quiet, no one's shushing them, and they're stomping in the mud puddles, it's grand. It's grand. So we'll keep doing our work and our charity work in Ethiopia, and we're going to continue to bring delight for our kids. Our nonprofit's called Embrace Compassion. You can find us on Facebook or on our website or on Instagram, and that's what we're working for. So,
Well, Jennifer, thank you. And even though we did talk a little bit when we were a part of that panel, we didn't have, enough time to individually talk about all of that. But hearing Julian's story, and of course, it brought back a lot of
mm,
memories, of being
mm,
neuroblastoma.
mm,
And sometimes, and I actually wrote down something you said, because it hit me when you were talking about it. It's saying trying to make sense about something that doesn't make sense. A lot of parents that are just starting in this journey, a lot of parents that are in this journey a couple of years, such as myself, there's a lot of times where we're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense,
right.
and we can say, and not just from our children, but I've told people, when you go and you're walking in an oncology floor, you can see the face of God in these children that are running around there playing around, and you just can't make sense. You're like, why these kids? Why
Right.
are kids having to go through this? Why are doctors telling us and having a lot of misdiagnosis? Why are doctors telling us there isn't much we can do anymore?
Mhm.
Our research only goes to this much. And when people say it's rare, like your doctor told you, that to me, it upsets me. And yes, it might be something that, again, before you and I, we were told that our child had cancer. We were not cancer parents. We became cancer parents when they told us that. And it
Mhm.
was then that we started doing our research, and we started advocating for these people, and what we're doing now. And honestly, I commend you. You're 6 months out, right?
Mhm.
It's been 2 years for me, and it took me so long. It's been over 2 years for me, and it took me so long to even find my purpose. Like you said, I know that everything that my daughter went through and everything that Julian went through, there is a higher purpose right now for us to be doing what we're doing right now. It took me a while, and you actually messaged me the other day when I posted something on Facebook. We're human, and we're bereaved parents, and we suffer. And just like you felt, I still have those things where sometimes I feel like I failed. Like I'm, as parents, we promised the very first time we held them in our arms to
Mhm.
protect them as
Right.
much as we could, and it got to the point where we just couldn't. So we're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Here I was, holding my daughter when she was going through her treatments, telling her, baby, everything's gonna be okay, when I felt like I was lying to her. But I actually had a pastor friend of mine said, Joel, no, you were not lying to her. You were actually prophesying to her that she was going to be okay, and she's okay right now. And
Mhm.
those are the little things that I want to see right now, that like to see. But then again, we're human, Jennifer, and we were talking the other day, and we were even
Right.
talking off camera how difficult, the situation is. Um, and So for your nonprofit that you had, to be able to connect with this, I think that's so amazing. And so we are going to be putting all the websites to the Embrace Compassion, all of the information here, so people that want to know, or parents that have children that are going through this, that want to just go out and be out and, like you said, have fun and crack some eggs and stuff, they can reach out to you. So actually, I'm also very interested, and I know this is dealing with cancer and everything, but I love what you're doing with traveling to Ethiopia. So if you can just, share with us a couple of, what it is that you do when you go over there. I think that is fascinating. I think that is so awesome. And God is using you, and God was using you prior to Julian even being here. And he got, maybe God sent one of his angels to here on earth with Julian to go to Ethiopia and see these kids. But what is it that your charity does with these children from Ethiopia?
Mhm. Well, we've really focused on the kids from day one, and we've called them our bright spots, like hidden gems, treasures. And over the years, it's evolved, but what we discovered was that just simply to give clean water, which we started with a water well, just simply to give shoes is not enough. In the same way with my own kids, they need so many things, right? And so we called them our bright spots, and we started choosing a child one by one that the village, our family in the village, said these are the kids that would be a good fit. So kids that are in school, and we provide all of the things that they need for school alongside their family, really to encourage family preservation, because we believe if they can stay in their family and be encouraged by them and to have the supplies that they need, so they don't need to be displaced or sent somewhere else to another part of the country, then that's what's best. So we supply everything from hygiene supplies for our girls, hygiene, teeth, soap, Vaseline, iodized salt, things that prevent goiter. We've done a lot of research, multivitamins, vitamin A for night blindness. We really look at that whole child: school supplies, uniforms, tennis shoes, um, notebooks, pencils, all the things that they need to be able to go to school. So that's one whole aspect. But you know what our big kids in that program are telling us now, what has meant the most to them? Sometimes I'm still even amazed. They said the most important thing that we've done as a nonprofit to help them is we told them that they're valuable, that they're loved, that they can do it, that they're strong, and to keep going. And that is what our big kids who've gone through the program of the last 10 years say is the most important gift. And I'm humbled by that, because that simply comes from God's love in us overflowing. That doesn't come from me being amazing, from me trying to save the day or to give a trinket of hope away. That's just living in relationship and love and coming alongside another kid, another family, another mama, another sister who's suffering. And it's amazing to me how much that overlaps too with neuroblastoma. When we were in the hospital, there really isn't a lot that our friends could do for us. There are little things, but the hope and love and encouragement and praying for us and being there and just knowing that people were there is most powerful. So we do that. And then ironically, I've been volunteering in the hospital all these years, in that rural hospital. I'm not worth anything medically, maybe a little bit now, but back then nothing. But I can watch and observe and see what things are going on and how I might be a part, or I can figure out where there are gaps where we might be able to bring supplies. So in teamwork with the doctors, my medical friends over there, we say, hey, how could this be a little bit better? I see you have rocks hanging off of their legs. Seems like there should be something we could do better for broken bones. Oh, pins and nails. Okay, let's see if we can get those products. Oh, you don't have adequate wound care. Let me learn about that and where we can get bandages. Or we brought for the very first time ostomy supplies. There's a group of nurses back east that's all they do. They're retired nurses. They collect ostomy supplies. So we rolled out the first ever colostomy ostomy program in our rural hospital using YouTube videos and supplies. So we help there in the hospital, teaming up with them. We have 150 kids in our little family program. We finished 6 water wells. We worked a little bit with solar, but I'll tell you, the number one thing that we try to do is to say, hey guys, what do you need? How can we help out? Can we come alongside you? There's no part of us that goes over there and tries to pretend like we're the big boss, like we got it all going on, we got it all figured out, but just with this servant attitude that says, hey, what can I do? And I think that was so evident too with going through neuroblastoma treatment, is that everyone has a time in their life where they need a little help and encouragement and hope. And my time to share has been over the last years in Ethiopia, and then being a recipient of love and kindness from our friends, financial gifts, all of the things to make things a little bit easier. And now it kind of is going full circle again, where we get to be the ones to help share here at the farm. And I don't know, having purpose has helped to heal my heart, and somebody else gets blessed by it. And when other people's were fulfilling their purpose to help us, it's just a win-win.
Yes, it is. And we are blessed to be able to be a blessing to other people as well. Jennifer, you were speaking about like financial gifts to our viewers that are interested in making some sort of donation. Maybe it's money, maybe it's supplies or something, whether it's for your Ethiopia trips or for what you're doing right there with your farm. How can people get a hold of you? I mean, we are going to be putting again all the links here when we do the description of the video, but can you talk to us? Can you give us the website or the Facebook, what's it under and all that?
Sure. The website is embracecompassion.org, and you have to make sure you spell compassion correctly. We had 3 guys that came together this year, and with us and our new expanded mission, they donated all of their time, everything. We didn't pay a cent for the new website, and it is stunning. And it's not me, it's them. So it's pretty easy to navigate, and you can kind of look at the 2 different programs, the Ethiopia side, the Cancer Kids side. And one thing that we say is that it's about $40 a month to do the programming for one of our Ethiopian kids, or to provide an experience for a child here at the farm. And there are easy ways to do that online. But if you just want to reach out and you have something specific, or you're close by, or medical supplies that might be available, feel free to just drop a message in that box that's there on the website, and we'd love to hear from you. For me personally, partly because of some of the government interactions that happen in Ethiopia, I keep things kind of locked down on our Embrace Compassion Facebook side. But if you're really curious, you can friend me on Facebook, and I'll kind of see how things are, and if we feel comfortable with that, and we'll let some more people in. So
awesome, yeah. Jennifer, thank you for so much. That information, all that information will be going up. Now, before we finish, Jennifer, I always ask the parents 2 questions, and I wanted to ask you the same thing and get your response from this. I always ask, what advice would you give parents that are going through the journey that both you and I have gone through? What has helped you, what hasn't helped you, whatever kind of advice you want to give. And what advice would you give parents that have perfectly healthy children?
Those are great questions. I think the grace and gratitude really, really helped me through the journey, because it is so hard. And looking for those places and those things to be thankful for in the moment, to take my eyes off of that tragedy, and to be gracious with the people around me, to try to overlook and not to be offended when I didn't have to be offended. I mean, you're just so raw and so broken and so hurting and so much suffering that it's easy to just go into angry mode. At least it would have been for me. And to try to stay tender and soft through all of it, I think, and advocate. That's the truth. You got to keep advocating, keep asking the questions, keep looking out. When in doubt, ask some other parents, ask your oncologist, and don't be intimidated by that just because of where you're coming from. Ask, ask, ask. And I think for healthy families, I would just say, we all have things about our life that are hard. And there's your to cancer family, your pain might not be cancer, but there will be something else. And we all are in this journey together for kids and being advocates for children. And so not to think that you don't have a voice. You do have a voice. And to help us with that, share the story, create awareness.
Create awareness, share the story, and for everyone who's watching out there, we've said this in almost every video, but our children only get 4% funding for childhood cancer. So as Jennifer was saying, we have to advocate, we have to be a voice, and somehow we're gonna make a difference, and we need to make a difference for these kids, for our children, for these real life warriors. Family, I just want to thank everybody, and Jennifer, I wanted to thank you so much for all that. Family, for everyone who's watching, again, I'm going to be leaving the links to the Embrace Compassion website and to whatever Jennifer gives me here so I can post. Please check out this website. I think what she's doing is phenomenal in both of these things, with the childhood cancer and with the children in Ethiopia. If you have a chance to check out the website, I checked it out myself, and you're going to see the pictures of all these beautiful children. So guys, thank you once again for tuning in to the Gold Corner. Again, this is a channel dedicated in spreading childhood cancer awareness. We are a family, a broken family, but we're broken together. Thank you so much. And remember to live each day to its fullest, because tomorrow is not promised. And just hold on a little while longer, because we're almost home. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.